I thought I will manufacture a large penis and attach it to my own penis, and I will see how that changes my walk, because I reckon it'll change my walk. And then I was, and I actually Googled buying an online penis, and it just became a little bit too anatomical, and some of them had veins, and and then I thought, shall I go to a sex shop? And just the thought of going to a sex shop and asking for a penis was, especially if someone knew me, was too much.
Hey there, it's Connor Muller, and welcome to Let's Chat Showbiz. This podcast is all about Australian showbiz. We're talking the glitz, the glam, the tough times, and everything in between. Let's get this show on the road. Today we are joined by an Australian actor who you might remember from shows like Winners and Losers or Shaun Micallef's Mad as Hell. We are pleased to welcome Francis Greenslade. Welcome, Francis.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure having you here. Now, you've done a lot in your career, quite a bit. People might remember you mostly for Winners and Losers, would you say?
Yeah, that was a big show. That was that was one of the, it was Australian drama. They don't make a lot of anymore, much more, they don't make a huge amount, but people love it. People would identify with it, and the four girls that were in it weren't all models. They were all shapes and sizes, and people identified with them, and I think it really struck a chord. Yeah. And apart from being a very remunerative gig.
Yeah. Because it was very real in that way, that you had, people of different shapes and sizes, and it wasn't like your classic TV shows usually you saw. Yeah. So it was very real. And you played Brian Gross.
I was the father of one of the girls, which was nice, but you were only ever a quarter of the plot and part of a quarter of the plot, because there were four girls. So there was a lot of Denise Scott, who played my wife, in the kitchen saying, "Do you want a cup of tea, love?" to each other. And then, the way to get all the family in is to do it around mealtime. So we peeled a lot of carrots, and, we sat around this table at 10 a.m. in the morning and ate lasagna. So, but, it was a good gig.
Yeah. You mentioned Denise Scott there. What was it like working with Denise?
It was lovely. Yeah. And she's, she's one of Australia's treasures. But, we were the old ones in the green room, so that was nice to have someone of my vintage. And then, I went to, and also she's so entertaining, if you're waiting, you're just listening to Denise talk, it's hilarious. And then I went to see her on stage doing her stand-up, and I realised it wasn't just chat, she was actually trying out material. When we're sitting in the green room talking and she's telling me stories, although he laughed at that one, I'm going to stick that one in the act. So you sit there on stage and he actually told me that story before, and which I think is just what stand-ups do. They're constantly trying their material out. Yeah.
And your mother in the show was played by the late Anne Phelan.
Yes.
What were you married to working with Anne Phelan?
Oh, she was lovely. But interestingly, at the beginning of the first series, they sent us a backstory of each character, and his backstory was that my character's backstory was that his mother had died very early on, and he'd been raised by his father. And I thought, that's great. So, he never had a family, and now he's got a family, and that's what he wanted, and he's a happy, So I based my, character on the fact that my mother had died. In the second series, there's a knock on the door, and the mother appears, and they just forgot about the backstory. But she was great. She, and she'd been around. She, you do these big location, with the whole cast, and she would just go up to the director and say, "I think my character would be sitting over there." And so for the whole day she had a chair, and I just learnt from that to go, "I think my character's going to be sitting over there." Very cunning. She was I think she was Order of Australia, because she did a lot of union stuff. She really was a force
and
for
charity
good.
work and stuff. And
she was
did
great.
a lot.
Yeah.
Did a lot.
Yeah.
And of course, your character, Brian, he was a very humble, loving father figure, wasn't he? You didn't really see that very often on TV, but he was very down to earth.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think that Australia has a bit of not a problem, but I think our archetypal male is a really narrow thing. Yeah. You can't be soft, you can't be intelligent, you can't be odd. Yeah. There's a very narrow band we came over in 67, 68 from the UK, and I remember thinking that male thing, what you were permitted to do, was really quite rigid. So I was really quite you know, to play a man who just was gentle and happy and, you know, wasn't trying to be an alpha male, wasn't trying to be tough, you know, I thought that was, I was really pleased that I could play that character and it could be on national TV just that's what's possible in it. I mean, if you look at the UK, the male characters, there's a much wider range of you know. So I think we have a bit of an issue about it.
Definitely.
In this country,
Do you have a favourite memory of working on that show? Any scene or memory that comes to mind, or a funny moment that you can recall?
Denise Scott's mother was in a home and hadn't been well, and then on the last day of shooting the first series, that her mother died, and so she took the morning off, and it was this huge wedding with all the cast sitting at tables at the wedding reception, and they decided they would get someone of her stature and put a Denise Scott wig on her and face her back to the camera, and then when she turned up in the afternoon we could do her shots. But it was very strange because she had a tiny little face with this big wig, and people would forget that she wasn't here and come up behind her and go, "Hi, Denise," and this strange thing would turn around and they'd go, it was just this procession of people getting shocked by the not Denise. It was really a very surreal moment. And just sitting opposite this not Denise, you know, who, I mean, she was lovely, but it was a very strange experience,
Now, obviously, in the end, it was cancelled due to ratings. Was that right? Or
I think what happens is at that time, there was a government grant for up to 5 series. And I think we did 5, and then the government grant, we ran out of that. And then I think they went, I think ratings probably had been diminishing. It's interesting that when it started, the first series, the producer who created it, I think was quite quirky, and, you know, it was a soap, but it was a little bit of a step above a soap, because it had a sort of quirky sense of humour. And the writing, you know, was you know, sharp. And then she went away, and we got someone more corporate. Well, not more corporate, but just more of a director, and not someone who could easily cope with the Channel 7 execs. And the Channel 7 execs started to get their way, and the show got dumbed down and and you know, gags were taken out because they didn't understand them, and the writers got quite frustrated, and I think it went down.
And do you think it lost a bit of its original story? Because obviously it was about winning the lotto and that, but then by the end of it, you kind of, that was forgotten.
Yeah. I mean, that always happens in these things, but yes, it did. I mean, I think the first few series, they'd have a central principle, like, you know, in that situation, if the other 3 win the lotto and they use your birth date and you pull out, you know, should you have the money? It was a sort of, you know, there were 2 sides, and they managed to get some sort of social issue and have 2 sides in every episode, which was quite nice, and I think that disappeared later on.
And would have you liked to have stayed on?
Well, I did full Frontal in 95, and at the end of that I went, I'm not getting enough, it's not rewarding enough. I'm standing at the back of a sketch in a funny wig, and that's my work for the day, and I want more. So I left, which was financially silly, but was the right decision to make. You know, then I got married and had kids and had more of a career. So financially, yes. You know, if something, you know, 20 years ago you said, "Do you want to be on Neighbours?" I would have said no. Now I go, actually, you know, a regular salary. You know, I've done a lot of stuff, and I'm very happy to do that. So, you know, you all good things end, though.
That's right.
You can't.
Yeah. Now, you also played Alexander Downer in the film Chappelle.
That's
Chappelle
right.
Corby. What was that like?
It was only a couple of scenes.
Yeah.
And it was it's a tricky one, because they said, we don't want an impersonation, but if you're playing character, I didn't do an impersonation, really. His voice is quite tricky anyway. It's a very strange sort of voice. But I didn't even try that. But I think when you are doing that sort of a character, that's what's expected, even though... So it's really, I think it's a tricky thing. I played Bill Kelty in... They did a thing about ABC did a thing about the waterfront dispute called the Bastard Boys. Played Bill Kelty, and we did a really accurate wig but his hair was so ridiculous, and I was only in a few scenes, so every time I appeared, it was Francis Greenslade wearing the stupidest wig in the world. You know, it's it's a tricky thing playing real characters.
Yeah. You also did Blue Heelers, and you did 5 different characters. Is that right?
I returned to Blue Heelers 5 times as different characters. I was a master of disguise. I think I was a guy who worked in a bank. I was a amateur chicken farmer. I was an ambulance driver. I was a security guy, and there was something else. Oh, I was a roo shooter from up north.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that was a lovely. You know, you could, and I think you're only allowed to do one a year.
Right.
That's what they said. But as it went on, they needed more and more actors. They sort of relaxed it, so it was a very nice show for actors because you could rely on a Blue Heelers guest.
Yeah.
You know, and that was good for a few days. Yeah, but they don't really do that anymore.
No, that's what I was going to ask next. Do you think it's changed? Well, I mean, now in Australia, you don't really have. You used to have all these shows like All Saints, Blue Heelers, and they had to have all these guest roles.
Yeah.
But now,
no, it's not there at all. And in the theatre too, you know, there used to be a lot of little theatre. Even when I was here, there was Magpie, and there was Red Shed, and there was Patch, and there was Junction. You know, there was a lot of little theatre companies, and they're gone. You know, I mean, there are so yes, it's much harder. You've got the streaming, but there's not a huge amount. I mean, and there is stuff that comes to Australia.
Yes,
but the strike in the States really killed us. And I read an interview or some sort of article a couple of weeks ago saying even in the UK, senior TV producers are taking jobs like stacking shelves in supermarkets because there is no. So it's really dire at the moment in TV. Yeah. And I suppose they've got so much, you know, made.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard.
Do you think streaming services are better, or like do you think it's now? Because obviously back, you know, a few years ago, you used to have to wait a week to watch an episode, or like you had to wait, but now you can watch the whole show in a couple of days and then forget about it. Do you think it's better, or like?
I know it's you know, you get something, you win some things, you lose some. It used to be lovely when it was, you know, free to air and there was one episode and everyone was watching the same episode, and then you could talk about it the next day. But there's so much on now. There's no show like. I mean, I suppose Severance, but you go, have you seen Severance, or you know, what was that, Succession? That everyone was watching that, but did you see that episode? No, I haven't seen it. You can't talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, like, no spoilers. So you can't have those discussions anymore. I mean, sure, you can sit and go, let's watch another. There's still something nice about, I really enjoyed that, and then you've got to wait a week, you know, and that's in your head, You're stringing it out. Yeah, I don't know. It's different things, I suppose.
Yeah. You also did another show, Irreverent.
Oh, yeah.
Which I thought that was a brilliant show. What was that like, playing?
That was amazing. It was right in the middle of lockdown. It was in Mission Beach in Cairns, and Queensland hadn't had really any COVID, and it was really basically open, and that, you know, you were supposed to, you know, check in and where no one did. I got off the plane, we had to wear masks on the plane, got off the plane in Cairns and forgot that I was wearing a mask, went into a coffee shop, and this woman looking at me like I'm some evil leper, you know, you're wearing a friggin' mask, but it was great, and we were fairly peripheral. There was I don't know whether I should say this, but I will. It was written very sea changey. You know, these quirky characters and this fish out of water American man comes and pretends to be a priest, and this township of strange people. But a certain streaming company came in and said, no, we don't want that. We want more plot. And then, so drugs were found in boots and people were killed, and the original cast got sort of pushed to one side, so it didn't become as big a part as it was originally envisaged.
Right.
So we were up there for about 3 months, and I did about 16 days work.
Yeah, right.
Which is slightly frustrating, but then, you know, you're 3 months in Mission Beach. It was just lovely.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. An interesting show. Yeah, but I think it could have been better. I think it would have been...
Yes.
If they just trusted it to just have that sort of, that ambient sort of quirkiness, I think it would have been great. Yeah.
Now, you've done a lot of work with Shaun Micallef.
Yep.
Where did you first meet Shaun?
I met him here in Adelaide, at Adelaide Uni. We did Footlights reviews together. And I remember the first one I was in, he'd already been in a couple. He was obviously a, enormous talent. I remember turning up to rehearsals about an hour earlier than I should have because I was just so excited. And he would also turn up to... So we didn't really talk to each other, just mooched around outside waiting for rehearsals to start. But I think it was interesting that we were the two that were desperate to get to rehearsals. And we did various shows that, thank God there's no video evidence of because, times change and some of the things you do back then when you're, a young and stupid uni student, you're grateful that doesn't come back and haunt you because we thought we were the funniest people in the world and we weren't, and some of the sketches you go that was but it was the training ground. It was all that stuff, just come on in a suit and say come in Mr. Smithers in a funny voice and all that matters is getting the laugh. That's it was very good training for all that Micallef stuff later on. Yeah.
It's my urine.
That's it. And you've done Mad as Hell, obviously.
Yeah.
What's that like?
It's a great gig. It's very fast paced. You get the script on. Well, you get a first version of the script on Friday. The final version of the script comes out on Sunday, and then you shoot on Tuesday.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So it's very, very quick. You may only get 2 days notice. I mean, they're only little sketches, but nonetheless, it might be a new character, and you don't really know what the character's going to look like. And you go in on Tuesday for the read, and then there's the camera rehearsal, which is fine, but you do that in your own clothes. That takes all day. And then you have dinner, and then you go and get into your costume and go into makeup. And it's only when you look at yourself at that point, oh, right, that's who I look like. That's what my character is.
Ah, okay.
Sometimes that's the, right, what I had planned to do was completely wrong,
Yeah.
So it really is, and sometimes it's great, and you can have input into that. You can say, can I do this? Can you make me look a little bit more? So that's fantastic. And I think it was a really useful show in the sense of, you could turn it on and see have the piss taken out of the morons in charge.
Yeah.
I think it was a little, and it lasted, it covered almost entirely the period that the Liberals were in government. And you had people like Micallef and Barnaby Joyce, and, they're just asking to be taken the piss out of. And then Albanese got in, and suddenly, I mean, you've got Penny Wong.
Yeah.
Penny Wong is not as easy to take the piss out of as Micallef is. So they seemed all, a little bit more sensible. They've been disappointing, as you knew they would, but nonetheless, it's not quite as easy to take the piss out of them as the other lot. So it was probably good it ended when it did.
In 1987, you appeared on Hey Hey It's Saturday.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
And at that time, the judges on that shoot were Peter O'Brien and Jane Clifton.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
Tell me about that. I won't make you watch the footage, but I've watched the footage, and
we were doing a show at a club called Club Foot, which a friend of ours ran on Blythe Street in town. I don't think it's there anymore.
Right.
And we were doing a cabaret act, and it's a sketch thing that Shaun had written, and Hey Hey was being filmed in Adelaide for the first time ever, and the director said, all right, you three are going on it. And the other two said, under no circumstances are we going to go on that show. And so Mark said, all right, Francis, you do it by yourself. And, all right. So that was fine. And it went very well. And we did get a lot of, the show sold out. It was very good publicity. It's a competition, so you sign away rights. So they have ownership of that. And, it used to be on Qantas flights, and you'd go. Now I've moved on. I don't really do that anymore. So, but every once in a while, I have to take this poison pill of being reminded of this act.
When you do things like this, no,
it's very, it's fine. It did well, but it was about 40 years ago.
Yes.
So it was what it was. I occasionally get rung up by Hey Hey and said, and asked, we want to do where are they now?
Oh, yeah.
Red Faces people, and you just want more content, and I'm not really interested in you, especially since you're not offering to pay me,
Yeah.
So no, I think I'll leave that behind. But yeah, it was what it was. Yeah.
You've done a bit of theatre work as well. In 2016, you did The Odd Couple at the MTC.
Yeah, with Shaun.
Yeah, what was that like?
It was interesting. Shaun was approached by the MTC and said, do you want to do something? And what would you like to do? And so he sent them a few plays, including The Odd Couple. He said, and they said, yeah, The Odd Couple is the one we choose. So he came to me and said, would you like to do it? And that was lovely. And the original concept was that we would swap characters because we didn't know who we wanted to play. Whether we wanted to, Felix is the clean one and Oscar is the slob. And we couldn't work it out. And, I think Gielgud and Ralph Richardson did it with Iago and Othello. In the UK years and years ago, they swapped. So we were going to swap every week. And we got a guy called Peter Houghton, who's a great director, to direct it. And we said, this is what we thought we might do. And he said, under no circumstances, you're insane. Because, and when we came to rehearse it, we realised that we had enough trouble just getting one character, but we still didn't know who we were going to play. So we went into the MTC and into a room, just the three of us, and we read through it once with Peter taking all the other parts, and then we swapped roles and we read through it again. And at the end of that, Peter looked a little bit worried and said, I think you're both Felix. And I think he's right. We should have both been playing Felix in different productions. Neither of us was really Oscar. And I said I wanted to be Oscar. I didn't want to have to take Felix home. He's such a hyper, manic, whiny character. And I thought it might be better because, the characters do seep into your personal life.
Yeah.
So I said, Oscar, I've written this in my book. Where's the camera? My book called How I Learned to Act. Am I doing that? Down the barrel? Anyway, this is a story I tell in my book about that process that I realised I was miscast as, and I had a great time and the audience loved it, but I was miscast as Oscar. And the director at the beginning of rehearsals, Peter kept saying, he's got to be a bit heavier. He's got to be heavier. I decided that Oscar had an enormous penis. And I should say now down the barrel that my penis is very satisfactory. But I thought Oscar's got an enormous penis. So I thought I will manufacture a large penis and attach it to my own penis, and I will see how that changes my walk, because I reckon it'll change my walk. And then I was, and I actually Googled buying an online penis, and it just became a little bit too anatomical, and some of them had veins, and then I thought, shall I go to a sex shop? And just the thought of going to a sex shop and asking for a penis was, especially if someone knew me, was too much. So I got this bit of red flannel, and I attached it. It was a very stupid idea. I attached it with tape, which had its issues when you unattach it. And when no one was at home, I wore it around the house, and it did give me a different walk. It was really quite effective. And then, I did that a few times, and I worked out how it felt and how the different. And then I thought I'll take it into rehearsal and I'll wear it during rehearsal. And I wore it once, and I was so stressed that it was going to fall off, and someone was going to ask why a piece of red flannel had just fallen out of my trouser pants. I couldn't cope, and I had to go to the toilet and take it off. But anyway, that was fine. The effect was achieved, and the director did come up to me and say, I think you've got the character. I don't know what you're doing, Francis. I think you've got the character, which was lovely. And then my wife said to me one night when we were in bed, I don't know what you're doing, but can you not leave tape with your pubic hair on the bathroom? So obviously some tape had come off, and I don't know what she thought I was doing. And I said, oh, okay, well, this is what's happening. And she was just quiet. And I don't know what was passing through her head. Something like, yeah, that's the sort of stupid thing that fucking idiot would do. And then she actually did say, you fucking idiot. And that was the end of it. But yeah, it was a very effective little bit of method
wow.
acting, which worked. Yeah, it's in my book.
Yeah, you mentioned your book there.
Yeah.
What else can we expect in your book?
Oh, it's a combination. I really like those. I like reading acting books, but they really come to life when the writer starts giving you concrete examples. Like when we were doing, As Good as It Gets, I told Helen Hunt to try the scene this way, and you go, right, that's fine. And similarly, I like reading actors' biographies, but they tend to be a bit lovey-dovey, and I worked with Larry and What Larks. Yeah. When they start saying, I couldn't come to grips with this particular part and I worked out this, then it's interesting. So I tried to write a book that it's composed of, because I didn't go to drama school, I learnt on the job. It's composed of stories of my career where I did fuck up and then learn something. So on the one hand, it's a memoir, sometimes amusing, of my acting career, but told through acting lessons. And on the other hand, it's a book about how to act, told through stories of my career. So it's a strange beast, but it's stories of what I learnt and who was on stage with me when I learnt and what was going wrong when I learnt it.
Yeah, and where can people purchase that book?
Well, I know they have it at imprints, but you can get it online anywhere, Amazon or Currency Press are the ones that published it, so they have it.
Yeah. Do people often recognise you in the street?
Yeah, sometimes. When I was doing Mad as Hell and Winners and Losers at the same time, and you'd get people coming up. There wasn't much, not often a crossover. They knew me from one or the other. Yeah. When I did Full Frontal back in the day, that was a very successful show, especially among 12, 13-year-old boys. So I would be, there was one, and they'd come up and say, "You that guy," and then they wouldn't really know what to say. And at one point I was pursued down the street by a group of 13-year-old boys screaming, "That's him." "No, it isn't." "Yes, it is." I had to go into a bookshop to try and get away from them, and then they followed me in and started climbing up the shelves to peer over the top to see. So that was, Full Frontal was the height of it, I think. Yeah.
Now you're in Adelaide at the moment for your Fringe show, which you've directed.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
It's a play called The Platypus, which I wrote and directed. It's a two-hander. It's on at Holden Street Theatres, but if you've got a time machine, you'll be able to go and see it because the Fringe will be over by this time this is on. It's a two-hander about the disintegration of a relationship, but I wanted to write something that was relevant to anyone who came and sat down. They could see their life on stage. That most people have had some sort of relationship, and that relationship might have broken down. So it's a fairly universal thing. And then I started writing it, and it became really bleak really quickly because there's nothing interesting about happiness. It's not dramatic. So you tend to write conflict and discord, and I didn't want to inflict 90 minutes of that, unrelieved, discord on an audience. So I've told it through different theatrical genres. So it's sort of based on the idea that when you're at home, you're as normal as you would possibly be, and you hang around with your partner and you're just you. And then you go out of the house and you meet, your next door neighbour or an old school friend or a policeman or whatever, and you have a different persona to them. You put on it's a bit of a mask. So every time the characters go out of the house and meet someone else played by the other actor, it's a different theatrical genre. So, he goes to drop the kid off at school, and he stops to talk to his another mother, and they have a scene that's entirely in limericks. And she has lunch in the lunchroom at work, and there's a new person at work, and he starts addressing her in restoration comedy, and she goes along with it. So, there's a bit of Shakespeare, there's a bit of Oscar Wilde, there's some stand-up, there's a music theatre, there's, a ventriloquist act. It's all, and there's naturalism. When they go home, it's back to naturalism. So it's that's the sort of conceit of it. And then it's a story about their disintegration as a couple.
Right.
And whether or not they can, come back together after the magic's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right. At the end of each episode, I ask the guests to ask a question for the next guest.
Oh, okay.
And I'll read you the question from our last guest, which was Australian actor Rob Carlton.
Yes.
And he said,
Oh, yeah, okay, here we go.
can you remember the time in your life when you were most uncertain about the future? And can you remember the thing or person that helped you through it?
Oh. That's a really interesting question.
It is, isn't it?
I think that as an actor, you live with complete ignorance about what is going to happen, and unfounded optimism that something will turn up. You have to, but there's going to be. You don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be different. I think when I started out, I didn't worry about anything. I knew that it was an insecure career, but it's fine. I've got the optimism of youth. So I think the answer to that question is at the moment is because work. I think the industry it's got harder and harder and harder every year for a number of years, and I think it's worse than it's ever been. And there was a thing about survive till 25 that this year was supposed to be the thing where I've yet to see any evidence of that. I think as an actor, you just have to learn that you're not going to get patted on the back, and there are going to be long periods of time when people aren't interested, people don't hire you, and it's not because you've fallen out of favour, it's not because people hate you, it's just one of those things, but it's really hard. Always been really hard. At the moment, I think it's harder than ever. As far as what helps you get out of that, I think it's doing things like, well, it's having family. I think family helps because that grounds you. I think it's also doing things like, this Platypus, the play, it's not a money-making exercise. It's just a creative thing that I wanted to do and am doing, and that, even though it's not remunerative, is really rewarding. And my son wanted to play the drums when he was young, and we bought him a drum kit, and then of course he gave it up, and I wanted to sell it, and he said, no, you're not allowed to sell it. And, well, I'll start learning. So I started learning to play the drums, and I found 3 other guys my age, and we play the songs that we liked before we had any taste, and that is extremely rewarding as well. So I think they're the things that you have to do just to feed your soul and take your mind off the bank balance. Yeah.
And now a question to ask the next guest. Okay. Now, we don't know I have no idea who it could be. It could be anyone.
All right.
But a question to ask
What was the moment at which you said to yourself, I'm going to do that? I'm going to be whoever it is, and whatever field it is. What was the moment that made you go, yes, I'm doing that?
Yeah, fantastic. And just one more last question. Is there anyone that you would think that would be good on Let's Chat Showbiz?
Does it have to be Adelaide?
No, doesn't have
You
to
should
be.
get William McGuinness on. I could say Shaun. Shaun would be great.
Yep.
But William McGuinness is a really nice actor, lovely man, but has a naughty streak a mile long. And is very amusing. So
fantastic. Well, thank you for your time, Francis. It's been a pleasure interviewing you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, all the best with your show.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want more episodes of Let's Chat Showbiz, you can follow along on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Instagram, TikTok, and even Facebook for all you oldies. See you next time on Let's Chat Showbiz.